And we're back. Welcome to No Direction, your Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram, and I'm joined by a very special guest host, Luis Loza. Hey, Luis.
Hi, Perram. Thanks for having me on. I hope I can fill the Ryan-sized hole in all the fans' hearts this week.
Indeed. And those of you, do not despair. Ryan is taking a week off to enjoy some much-needed vacation. He is having an island time here this winter, and I'm very jealous. But do not worry too much, because today's episode is going to be fantastic, because joining us from Paizo is Ron Lundeen. Hey, Ron.
Hello!
Now, Ron, you are one of the developers for the Adventure Path line, yes?
That is the Pathfinder Adventure Path is the key thing that I work on at Paizo.
Oh, yes, I forgot that we have to specify, because you all have more than one game now. More than one good game, actually, because I really like the other one, too. But, yes, and specifically, you were the developer for the Extinction Curse Adventure Path, correct?
Absolutely right. There's been a lot of fun. It's been very fun to do on our side of it here, and I'm excited that this is the time when it's starting to roll out to everybody to see and experience.
Yes, and I remember we were super excited about this at PaizoCon when you all put this up on the big old display screen, and we saw that this was going to be involving a circus, and that seems to be the key hook that everybody is latching onto. So I guess we're just going to jump right on in it. Give us the very quick sales pitch for what the Extinction Curse Adventure Path is for anybody who may not be paying attention to the Adventure Path line right now.
Oh, absolutely. So the Extinction Curse Adventure Path, which, like our second edition Adventure Paths, takes the heroes from first level all the way up to 20th level, is set within a frame where the heroes are members of a traveling big top circus. They are either the performers in or are supporters for the circus, but very quickly on, the circus becomes the hero's job to manage. It's also their responsibility to take it from place to place to get new acts and bigger shows. But as they do so, the heroes sort of stumble upon a very serious threat to the Starstone Isles. It takes place on the Isle of Kortos and the Isle of Erin, which are all around the city of the center of the world. And so there's an awful lot of travel in this. There's an awful lot of whimsy, unusual types of NPCs you get to meet, and very villainous, gross monsters you get to fight all the way through from the beginning to end.
Wonderful. So what is it about the circus that made you all decide to go this route for this adventure path? Because that seems to be a lot of what the excitement is for people looking forward to this one.
Well, there's a lot of people to blame for that, and I think perhaps the number one person to blame for it is Jake Tondro. He wrote the first adventure for the Extinction Curse campaign, The Show Must Go On. But more importantly than that, when we were sitting in a room together, as we do around here, we're concepting this adventure path, and we knew that it was going to be on and around the Isle of Kortos. We knew that it was probably not going to involve the city of Absalom, because we knew the city of Absalom would be the focus of a later adventure path, the Agents of Edgewatch, which immediately follows. So in essence, we wanted to have a counterpoint to something that was entirely urban, to be able to say this is distinctly not that. It travels around quite a bit. And when we were sitting in there, we had representatives from the different departments. You know, I was there because I was going to be doing the development of this. James Jacobs, our creative director. We had some of the rules people involved. Stephen Radney McFarland, who was there in the design team at the time. And then Jake had come by from the editing department. And one of the things that James Jacobs mentioned, he said, we've never started an adventure path in like a little town where the circus comes to town. We've started a couple of adventures that way, but we never kicked off the whole adventure path that way. And we thought, well, okay, we could do that. And Jake was the one who said, why don't we have the PCs be part of the circus that comes to town? And then it sort of spun off from there. It spun off for a lot of really neat ideas about having the heroes be performers on top of monster fighting heroes, and being able to have a home base that travels with them. There are a lot of campaigns where it's really important to have one home for the heroes. Often that's a little town. It's like Sandpoint or Breach Hill or something. But in this one, the home is something that you bring with you. It's a big. It's all of the accoutrements of a traveling circus. Uh, so I think that Jake is a little bit to blame. I think that all of the writers, and my lack of clear communication are also get a lot of the blame, because when I was putting this outline together and pulling writers together for it, one of the things that I just seen was the entirety of the Showtime series Carnival, which was fantastic. I loved it, and I was warned ahead of time, you'll be mad when you get to the end of the second season and it just sort of ends because the show was canceled. And I was really surprised and mad when that happened. But that's a traveling magical carnival during the Dust Bowl. The magic there is sometimes very subtle, sometimes overt, but traveling magical carnival was something that's very much in my mind. But I didn't say the word carnival to people. What I said was the word circus. And that's a very different thing if you're picking up on that. It was a misstatement on my part, but something that was a very fortunate one. Because then I got big tops, and I got clowns, and I got elephant acts, and I got, high wire trapeze. I mean, it was all of the things that you would expect to be in a circus ended up being folded in, definitely in the first couple of adventures, but then also throughout. And I was very fortunate because it became something much bigger than a traveling carnival to become a traveling circus. And from the very beginning, from the first scene, the big top is up and people are expected to see a show, and the heroes are the ones who have to put it on.
So I really like the idea of a circus and being part of a circus, but that very much feels like something that would maybe get old after an adventure or two, a module or one volume's worth. So how do you extend the circus into a full AP beyond just that first adventure?
It's a good question. The key part of it is that our game is not at its core a circus simulator. It is a combat simulator. And as a result, the things that the players uncover, that the heroes uncover as they go, requires some delving into dungeons. It requires some interacting with unusual or suspicious NPCs, but the circus is the home base they come back to. And so, if in fact the first adventure, which takes you from level 1 to 4, was putting on an array of circus performances from first level to fourth level, it would probably get stale by that point. But one of the things that we've done is make sure that to mimic the feel of having to pull up stakes and move on, is that the adventures go from place to place because the circus has to move from place to place. And so what happens is, all right, you've put on at least one show, but maybe more, depending on how well you do and how profitable they are. The shows that you put on, by necessity, have diminishing value in the place where you start. So you've got to try to go to the next bigger city, and then you go to the next more populous mainland, and then you've got to go to the bigger city after that. So the reason that you keep with the circus is because it keeps getting sort of bigger and bigger as you go along. You're able to add more acts to it. It was fantastic to be able to be providing not just several NPCs that are interesting and vibrant on their own, but in each of those encounters to ask, could this person perform in a circus? And if so, what would they do? So, all right, we've got an exceptionally arrogant pixie that shows up in one of the adventures, who is particularly interested in aerial acrobatics that he could perform in front of a crowd of people. And so you want to be pulling people in to sort of refresh the circus. In fact, it's such a big part of at least the first few adventures, that we do devote a fair amount of time to later in the adventure path, where you have to leave the circus behind. You're going to a place that is so overtly dangerous that anyone other than the high level heroes would just get killed, but you've got to go do a thing and then come back. And so making sure the circus is okay is something that we devote some words and time to, because the players by that point will have kind of grown to love their little circus they're in charge of. So they want to make sure it does okay, even if they're going to have to go on an expedition for a couple of weeks or even a couple months away.
Now, I want to definitely get into the what is going wrong aspect of this adventure that makes it more than just the circus simulator, as you alluded to earlier. But speaking of running the circus and managing the circus, how is that accomplished? Are there going to be rules subsystems introduced for managing a circus that the PCs will actually be engaging in? Or is this going to be more of a background narrative thing?
You can do either. There is, in fact, the Show Must Go On, the first volume, has a article in the back of it, Life in the Circus, which presents a fairly robust circus subsystem. Maybe with an emphasis on the fairly robust. It's got a series of rules for how you set up the different acts in a circus, how the heroes develop individual tricks, which is the thing they perform in front of a crowd, and staging that within a certain number of acts during a circus performance. You can put on one performance a week, and you take downtime to build up to it, try to build up some anticipation before the circus starts. Anticipation, capital A, is a number that you track. When you're performing the circus, you build up some excitement, capital E. And if your excitement exceeds the anticipation you've set up, but based on the skill checks you make throughout performance of the circus, then you've got a successful show. The successful show generates money, but the money has to go right back into the circus. That is to say, there's no run some circus and get a bunch of money and then run out and buy a bunch of magic items with them as part of the system. The system is, we've had a lot of successes. What are we going to do? We're going to buy a bigger tent. We're going to buy nicer seats. We're going to buy, beer for the crowds, so your circus gets better as you get better. And the system is flexible because we can't predict exactly what type of acts people are going to want to do. We can't say, okay, you've got to be a character that is the lion tamer. We don't know that's going to be the case. The same way we can say, well, you might have an alchemist, or you might have a barbarian, or you might have a champion. We can't even very easily categorize the kind of stuff you want to do. And so what we do is we give people quite a bit of freedom to develop their own circus trick, based on whatever skill you want it to be on, whatever you can kind of justify. In some of the testing we've done, we've had people who they want to recite hymns as part of their act and make it based on religion. They want to endure something, so it's based on their fortitude save, or throw knives, so it's based on an attack roll. It can be based on a lot of whatever numbers you feel like make sense. We do have some traits that we trigger to it. And to start out with, you can have your circus trick can involve an animal of any sort. It can involve fire of any sort, or water. So there are a few traits that you can kind of append, the same way that a lot of feats or class abilities, spells have certain traits. The tricks you develop do as well. And then one of the neat things about going through and getting more acts to pull into your circus, you also learn more traits that you can add to make your own tricks different or better. A key difference that provides some maximum investment and flexibility is if you find an NPC who's got a trick that's a thing they can do. Okay, this is a person that juggles fireworks. All they're ever going to do is juggle fireworks. That's the thing they do. But you could pull that in and say, you know what? I was juggling knives before. Now I feel like juggling fireworks. I'm just going to change my trick. The hero's going to change around the tricks that they do in order to make something that's sort of constantly new and fresh. At least that goes back to your question about how is this interesting? Well, because when you meet somebody who can, add the musical or magical traits to what they do, you're like, I want to do that now. I'm going to adjust my trick. I want to do something different and better now. That said, so as much framework as we've got, we do understand that there are sort of two competing interests with the Extinction Curse adventure path. The first is people who want sort of the classic experience of going into dangerous places and hitting monsters in the face, and those people who want to spend a lot of time performing in front of a crowd in the circus. The adventure path caters to both, but allows you to minimize the circus. You reduce it. It's got some rules about how to reduce it to some performance checks, but keep kind of the same feel. If you want to spend a lot of time following up on mysteries or leads or delving into ruins, but there is a lot of events that happen in the game that become slightly easier, or you get more assistance if you've put on some successful circus shows. So people who want to lean into that a lot and devote their characters' resources to doing better with that can find the adventuring part not minimized, certainly, because that's not really what our game is about, but easier because that's the decisions that they've chosen to make.
Cool. So, I was going to ask. So, Ron, this is your first Pathfinder adventure path under the new second edition rules. What kind of challenges came with the new rules? Did you have those ready to go when it came time to assign the authors?
Goodness, no. This was the one of the things that we really wanted to do that was important to us. The first adventure path for second edition, Age of Ashes, was written entirely by in-house authors, particularly the exceptionally well-written third chapter and sixth chapter of that adventure path. But the directive for Extinction Curse was, hey, why don't we mix this up? Why don't we get people that we know can write a solid adventure for us, but aren't internal people in order to write this? Now, it turned out that we needed to have the first adventure ready to go very fast, faster than any of the outside authors felt comfortable to take on. So that's why Jason Tondro got that one. And the sixth chapter is written by Liz Liddell, who at the time was an outside contractor working for us, but by the time that adventure was turned in, she was actually working for us. So she ended up being internal. Snuck her way in on that. But we've got a lot of great people who have written stuff for us on the Pathfinder side and the Starfinder side to write. Miko Kallio has written a bunch of stuff. Greg Vaughn has written for every adventure path we've had. Kate Baker is fantastic on both the Starfinder and the Pathfinder side. And Jenny Jerzowski has written on the Starfinder side more recently than this, handled it really well. The downside is none of those people, myself included, had the final second edition rules when we started this off. They all had the playtest rules, and so my directive to people was, hey, just write this with the playtest rules, and that'll be my burden in development to sync it up, which was hard. It was the two biggest difficulties was that the math of how you give out treasure changed pretty dramatically. And many of the creatures that I had counted on us having because they were in the playtest bestiary either changed or didn't exist anymore, and so we had to scramble to find replacements. As the deadlines got later and later, we had more and more complete versions of the rules. So by the time it got to the last few, by the time it got to Kate Baker, who wrote the fourth one, Siege of the Dinosaurs, Miko Kallio, who wrote the fifth one, Lord of the Black Sands, and then Liz Liddell, we had final rules so they could kind of go back through their drafts in order to clean up. But it was I probably had fair to say the biggest challenge I've had in my couple of years at Paizo thus far is making sure these great stories and turnovers align to an ever-shifting set of rules.
So, do you think it was harder or easier to get the outside writers coordinated with incomplete versions of the rules or no version of the rules, or was it even harder to do Age of Ashes with definitely none of the rules?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I probably had a slightly easier time having at least the playtest to rely on. A lot of the things that had been that frankly have been very big successes in the game, the 3-action economy, the encounter exploration downtime mode, were in as part of the playtest, and so were things that the writers could rely on, and they could rely on them sort of whether they knew it or not. Um, in Siege of the Dinosaurs, which is sort of just what it says on the tin, right? You're you're, you're helping to defend a town against a siege of dinosaur riding bad guys. In Kate wanted to make sure, all right, well, you want to take actions where you go around and dig trenches and erect magical barriers and things like that. You want to be able to defend the town. Well, that's exactly the sort of things that the exploration system works for. I want to do this thing. It's going to take me, maybe a couple hours to do. All right, make a check. All right, you've done it well or you haven't. Moving on to the next thing. And so we're able to build a lot of that directly into the adventures. It's been fun to play with that in development too. As an example, one of the scenes has you rescue a bunch of people who have been who've been under attack. Now, by the time you get to these people, you're fairly high level. They're very low level. In a standard first edition combat, they wouldn't be able to help much at all. But that combat includes a new combat action that you can take, direct fire, where you tell them, hey, all of you guys go fire all your bows at that guy together. And then how well you're able to command them determines how much damage the enemy takes. So it's kind of an option to, put charisma into damage, I suppose, which is not very common, but there are certain situations that play into the system very well. And so the system has a good chassis to build that on.
Now, you mentioned the circus tricks and then this commanding people. It sounds like this adventure path leans very heavily into the advantage that second edition has, where all of the DCs and bonuses seem to be on the same math scale. Is that something you all leaned into for this, so that these things would be possible?
Yes, and in ways that are a lot more subtle than they seem. The way the math skill works, the table that's in the core rulebook saying this is a level 1 thing, the difficulty is 15. This is a level 20 thing, the difficulty is 40. That tracks as you go up. Your difficulty to do stuff follows along that number as your level goes up. So on one hand, you might think, well, man, why is it harder to do this trick the higher level I am? Well, it's because more is expected of you. You're going to make more of a splash. Audiences have seen your trick before. Now you're higher level. You can do more. The difficulty is a little bit higher. Your reward is commensurately higher. But the way that this math subtly reinforces that is that at first level, that DC can be kind of hard. It can be kind of difficult to get. You're not going to be able to get it most of the time unless you're sort of specifically built towards that. You built your character towards beating that DC, and many first level characters haven't. But by the time you get up to higher levels, 10th, 15th, 20th levels, if you've built your character that way, hitting those DCs it's not very hard. So what you feel like intentionally is when we start out as junior members of this circus, kind of thrown in the deep end where we have to take charge and we have to be sort of setting a good example and succeeding ourselves, maybe we can't do it quite so often. But by the time you're veterans at this, by the time you're much higher level, those DCs that you've chosen to focus on are kind of easy for you to do. You feel like, yeah, I'm good at this. I've been doing this for 15 levels. I'm good at it. And that's how you should feel. That's how we want you to feel.
And I think that's actually fairly believable, because the Craigslist magician that shows up to our school's ice cream social pulling a dove out of a handkerchief is impressive. But when I go to see like a Penn and Teller in Vegas, I want much more than that.
Yeah, there's more expected of them. Their level's higher, but their DC's higher.
Yeah. So looking through the first 2 volumes that some of the subscribers have at this point, there's a lot of cool stuff in the back matter. I see that you're giving away things like archetypes and feats and magic items, and obviously the whole circus subsystem and stuff. But how do you kind of decide the things you want to give out in the back matter beyond stuff that's just, oh, here's some information on the region you're in or the people that you're talking to.
Well, we actually have it, and this was new for Age of Ashes, that we've got a whole back section that's now called the Adventure Toolbox. The toolbox is intended to be rules resources that support the adventure. We've we experimented early on in Age of Ashes having somebody other than the adventure author write these, and that ended up being sort of a missed opportunity. Now we have the adventure author write those options, and they're rules options that playing in the adventure can unlock for you. One of the things that we do in the system is we've got this sense of commonality. Rules are either common or uncommon or rare. And as a default, I guess a lot of the stuff that shows up in the back is uncommon by nature. They're the sort of things you need to know somebody to learn or find as treasure to be able to use. And a lot of that is fairly thematic. If you've got an adventure where you are among, I mean, let's just say an undead city of drow, then you can have all sorts of undead and drow themed things that you're able to sort of find or buy in their ghastly markets or what have you. And those are the things that can show up in the back. We do make these very player focused in that they are things that we expect the players to use. I mean, or be used against them, as classic RPG tradition, right? Oh, well, you're hitting me with that sword and it hurts so hard. I really want it, so I can hit other people with it. But one of the things that we have in at least the first couple, we actually have, I think, I want to say in the first four, maybe, we have new archetypes. And the like the very first one has the staff acrobat and the juggler as archetypes. It also has the juggling feat, several circus themed weapons. There's a weaponized yo-yo that isn't called a yo-yo. It's a Diablo, but that's why it's a weaponized yo-yo. So there's a lot of neat things back there. It's a little bit of an awkward place for them in that they are, because they're uncommon. We don't put them right out in front of the players. We keep them for the GM to give out as the adventure says, or if the adventure doesn't say, sort of thematically as it seems fit. And this actually puts more of the tools. It's called a toolbox after all, into the GM's hands. I give you an example of this. I'm running an office campaign of the Extinction Curse for some of the people around here. And they found a couple of scrolls that I knew were new spells that show up in the first adventure. And one of the players sort of smugly says, "Well, I've got the requisite skill. As long reads over, so, oh, as long as it's a scroll of a common spell, I can just find out what it is." And I was able to look at him and go, "You don't know what this spell is." And everyone's like, "Wait, what?" It's like, that's right. It's uncommon spells, and they only managed to figure out what one of them could do, but they're keeping that. They really want to know what it does, and so it really feels like treasure, I think, to them, rather than here is a scroll of gust of wind, right? Instead, all right, well, here's a scroll of localized squall. What does that even do? And what is this other one? It has something to do with rain, we can tell, but we don't know what it does. So that's something that allows more, I guess, more wonder, I guess you could say, for the GMs to inject into a campaign that's sort of all about having as much whimsy and wonder as the players care to handle.
And I'm curious, that's a great example of something that second edition has brought to the table that you're able to take advantage of, the rarity system. And we've really enjoyed seeing how you all play with that rule system, because for a lot of us, it's kind of unfamiliar new territory trying to deal with what in the world is a uncommon scroll or a rare feat. What other aspects of second edition made parts of this adventure something you could do that would be much more difficult to have done in first edition?
I think that one of the things that we have as far as DCs go, having a consistent basis for what is hard or what is easy off of the skill list is something that helps us design. That's not something to rely on all the time. A wall is going to be a certain athletics DC to climb no matter how high level you are. But when you want to go, well, how difficult is it to negotiate a price with this person, or negotiate passage, or to try to charm this sea monster, right? Level gives you a good benchmark. And it's easy for us to be able to say, we think this sort of thing should be hard, even for characters who think to do it, or we think this thing should be easy if the characters think to do it, and then be able to say, all right, well, then here's the DC. If a DC is appropriate, and sometimes it's not. One of the very refreshing things that I think about this new edition is I like not hiding treasure behind skill checks. If you look at just about any of the first edition adventures, it is, all right, well, once they've defeated the enemies, they can search the room, and on a successful DC 25 perception check, they find a bunch of magic arrows tucked under a shelf or something. But because we have exploration activities, which is just sort of a question, what are you doing when you're not in the middle of fighting? And we can put in language like, if the PCs search capital S this room, here's what they find, right? So if you're playing your character, you're like, I kind of want to look around. You don't have to succeed at a sort of check unless something's exceptionally well hidden. The fact that you're saying in the game, I want to devote my resources to looking and finding anything there is to find, is immediately rewarded with, oh, well, you made the right decision to look around, because here's a thing. And I really like that opportunity.
So, Perram, it looks like we have a question in the chat. You want to tell people about asking questions to Ron here?
Indeed. No Direction and all the shows in the No Direction Network are filmed live in front of a Twitch audience. If you want to join us, we record every Wednesday at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Just go to twitch.tv/No Direction. You can find the links at our website, nodirectionpodcast.com, and we spam the crap out of it on all of our social channels as well. So do come on and join us live if you're able, and you can ask questions to us and our guests live during the show, such as Undead Fish, who asked, what Nutty Circus rules items did you see and decided absolutely must make it to the final version?
Oh, like what Nutty Circus items? I'm particularly proud of a magical spotlight. That's now there is I mentioned earlier that you can upgrade your circus with money you make from successful shows in a lot of ways. And sometimes we're able to take those upgrades and turn them into some of the specific things you find, like the inspiring spotlight, which you can actually haul around and point at people and turn on and shine on them in the middle of a combat in order to do things. It also functions as the spotlight upgrade to your show. But things like, so we've got a lot of animal training goads. Bull hooks is one of them. It's the tool you would use to teach an elephant, kind of direct an elephant. It's not a whip. They don't whip elephants on the circus. They would sort of take a long hooked stick and get them where to go. It's called a bull hook for a bull elephant. So you got magic bull hooks, magic spotlights. There's a magic nets that you have. You throw it on the ground, and anything falling towards that net is slowed. It doesn't look like it's going to slow you down. It looks like you're going to hit the ground pretty fast, but then you're slowed when you hit the ground. So there's a lot of fun circusy themed magic items they were able to throw around in here.
Also, Kitsune Warlock wants to know how mind-blowing is a 20th level circus performance going to be?
It is going to be entirely what your players do, what your heroes do. And I say that because as you find people throughout the campaign, they've got their own levels, and their level doesn't change. By default, you can decide their level. They level up if you'd like. But the first couple of people that you have is a snake charmer or a magician who gets out of a water-filled cabinet. Interesting to see, but frankly mundane. And then at higher levels, you've got the things you can find include people who can summon and control lava in big waves throughout the circus ring. people can twirl ribbons and have you look in between, not just into vistas into other planes, but into other times. Perhaps one of my favorites that you can find is by the time you're so high level that the existence of kobolds surprises you. You're like, oh, we forgot kobolds were a thing. We're so high level. You can find this little kobold who's sort of bonded with this stegosaurus, whom he calls Bongo, and he wants to run up and down the stegosaurus's back and pound drums as the stegosaurus kind of ambles around the circus. So the kobold's running up and down the back, banging on drums on the stegosaurus plates. So you've got all sorts of just fun things that get a lot more wild. But I say it's as crazy as your characters want for two reasons. One, it's up to you as the campaign goes on which of these people you want to slot into your circus. And secondly, even the very highest of these performances is only 19th level. So who are really going to be the stars of a 20th level circus show? Well, you are. The heroes are. Perhaps if you're very, very good at putting on this 20th level circus show, you might impress the scouts who are looking for performers to perform in Absalom, in the city of Absalom, for the once every century Radiant Festival, which is sort of like a massive World's Fair that begins the Agents of Edgewatch campaign after this one. So one thing we've done that's sort of a natural segue is to say, hey, if you've been super successful enough that you can go perform in the World's Fair, you can go there as those characters fade into the background, and the new characters who are sort of the city beat cops who are assigned to keep order during this fabulous festival get to tell their story.
That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
I hope you all keep doing really cool things like that.
Did you?
Well, we also have. Oh no, I can't say. That's stuff that hasn't been announced yet.
Did you do any more coordination with the next AP at all, or is it just that fun little connection there?
No, mostly it's that. The biggest coordination that we have is that each of the two adventure paths define the other, sort of by exclusion. The assumption in Agents of Edgewatch is that it is a strictly urban campaign in the city of Absalom, and that your characters are probably lawful. And the Extinction Curse expressly does not go to the city of Absalom, except maybe off into the sunset at the very end. And it's assumed that your characters are not the most law-abiding of individuals. After all, you've all run off to join a circus. And one of the player backgrounds that's in the Extinction Curse Player's Guide is expressly that you are a criminal lying low and consider the circus a decent place to lie low.
Now, I noticed that with this adventure path, it's taking place on the Isle of Krotos, and you have Agents of Edgewatch also hanging around here. The Tyrant's Grasp sort of had a really fun moment here that kind of left its mark, quite literally.
Yeah, yes.
And a lot of the PFS scenarios are taking place on Krotos, and you have the Dead God's Hand taking place on Krotos. Why is Krotos so focused right now?
Well, we've had, and one of the biggest things that you didn't mention is the big book we have coming out for Absalom, which is going to be a part of the lost something or other line. I don't know. A couple of other people work on that, which is going to be a big draw as well. One of the things that we've sort of seen is we have Absalom expressly set up as the city at the center of the world, but then we've got all these years of adventure paths where we don't ever go there. We've got some organized play scenarios that are set there, but it's almost like we say, here's this awesome, interesting thing. No, you don't get to play with it. Well, this is the time when you get to play with it. And one of the things that we expressly wanted to show off is at the Isle of Kortos, which is where the city sits, and then it's the neighboring isle of the neighboring isle next to it. That all of those, both of them together called the Starstone Isles, have tons of adventure opportunity in and of themselves. Those of us that are here in Seattle know that the Isle of Kortos is as big as the entire Olympic Peninsula, which is massive and has a lot of different, literally entirely different climates and biomes on it. So there's a lot that can be done there. We can show off. There's an awful lot of interesting locations and things you can do, even if you don't ever go to the city that's the most famous thing on it. And so we really wanted to show that that was the case, and that's what we've been able to do with a lot of the adventure paths, a lot of the adventures. Um, we're not going to be staying there forever, that's for sure. The next adventure we have coming out, the standalone modular adventure in the Pathfinder Adventures product line, is called The Slithering. And that takes place in the Mwangi Expanse. So that takes place in our fantasy Africa in a very exciting way.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get back to talking about that adventure for more than one reason. But you talked about this adventure would take you around the Isle of Krotos and its neighboring isle. What sorts of locations are we like to see? Because we haven't really got to see a ton of the island, even with all the other previous PFS scenarios that took place on it.
Well, there's a lot and let me tell you, everything runs the gambit from very small farm communities to bigger cities, Escadar and Diabel being the two biggest cities other than Absalom. So there's some urban fun as well. Negotiating the bureaucracy of a city is, in fact, one of the things that these chaotic circus people have to do at some point. And then there's logging towns and rugged mountains and strange cursed landscapes and in fact, even for part of it, you descend to significantly below the Earth's surface to one of the ancient irradiated vaults down underground. So there's a lot of different terrains that you go through. But there is one overall theme in the things that you find. This is the theme that was important to me to put into this adventure path, which is that in none of these cases, none of these places you go, is the land particularly healthy. There has been a severe environmental decline over the past couple of generations. And how that hits some of the local farm people, are very sympathetic characters, hits them very hard. The trappers, the hunters, foresters, they see things are just the land is just worse off now than it was in their parents' day and in their grandparents' day. And what are we going to do about that? I think the idea of a changing climate hitting people very hard is something that I expect to resonate. And the only sort of cheat that I make in this adventure path is that there is, in fact, a magical solution that the heroes pick up on and are able to enact.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit, because this has been, we've talked about how this is like the circus AP and there's all kinds of cool circus stuff, but it's not called Big Top Battlegrounds. This is called the Extinction Curse, and even Cirque du Soleil hasn't had anything that dark as one of the titles. so why is this the Extinction Curse and not, something very circusy like Invasion of Clown People?
I can answer that question as long as we point out, hey, this answer is a little bit spoilery.
Okay, so we're going to have some minor spoilers. Probably nothing you haven't heard if you listen to some of our Paizo Con or Gen Con talks on this, right, or read the back of the adventure path. So just some high-level minor spoilers.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. The main foe in this adventure path are Zolgaths. They used to be called troglodytes. Troglodytes aren't what they call themselves. They call themselves Zolgaths. And these are some Zolgaths that are just very, very angry. And they're very angry because they used to have a bountiful and green land that the god Eridan took from them in order to bring life to the Starstone Isles. Now, if they were a little more reasonable, they might say, hey, can we have our bountiful magic back, please? But that's not the kind of people that they are. These Zolgaths are violent destroyers, and they want to wipe out all of the life that benefited from this stolen magic. They want to trigger a ritual called the Extinction Curse, which the sixth volume goes into more deeply about what that involves. But as you might expect from the Adventure Path adventure entitled The Apocalypse Prophet, they want to bring about the end of all life on the Starstone Isles. And ultimately, the heroes are the ones who are equipped to stop that, and the only ones in position to do so. So there is a lot of fighting against a wicked and exceptionally foul-smelling evil throughout the entire adventure path. We have there are a few different types of Zolgaths in the bestiary, but Andrew Mullen, who has written quite a lot of things for us, has brand new Zolgaths in every one of these adventures that we've done, sort of increasing ability and power and prowess, to keep the appropriate challenge up with the heroes as they uncover more and more about what these Zolgaths are trying to do.
So you mentioned the Zolgaths, formerly known as Troglodytes. We haven't really seen a lot of focus on that monster in quite a long time. So what makes these a unique and fun foe to engage with?
I mean, they smell really bad. I mean, maybe not as bad as circus people. No, the thing that
I've survived Gen Con. I can handle that.
All right, then you're fine. Then you're fine. One of the things that I think is really interesting about the Zolgaths is they used to have a very extensive empire, deep underground. But they 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 have they've emphasized demon worship. Their god Zev-Gavazeb is one of the evilest of demon lords, the evilest of evil demon lords. And they've lost a lot of their psychic mastery and their advanced civilization, and they've embraced more lawless and chaotic ways. Not all of them. There are some good ones that are probably still around in enclaves underneath the ground. But what we're focusing on here specifically are those that follow the demon lord and those that embrace destruction as their way of life. And so you've got on one hand sort of a sad story of these evil creatures who have lost what they once had, even if they don't know it, and choose to lash out with violence on that. It's actually a very sort of kind of a if not acceptable and understandable kind of villainy.
Yeah.
Is there any chance to redeem any of the Zolgaths that you encounter?
I think that's probably even more spoilery than we ought to say here. But the general answer is no, and I think it's important to point out that the vast majority, practically all of the Zolgaths are irredeemable, not because they're Zolgaths, but because they're demon worshippers, right? I mean, they're bad not because of what they are, but because of what they do, which is an important message that I want to be sending for this as well. I don't want enemies that you feel bad about punching in the face. If they're demon worshippers who are setting towns and farms and townspeople on fire, they need some face punching, so you're going to go do that.
Now, you mentioned it before, but this isn't the only major adventure releasing this year that you're involved with. You are doing something that has made me squee the first time I read about it. That is the Slithering, and it has lots and lots of slimes in it.
Yeah, this is the next adventure that's coming up, next standalone adventure coming up for us. It's got a couple of interesting features that make it real firsts in the new second edition. It starts at 5th level, not first, so it's something that can slot into people who've gotten some experience with the game under their belt. For reasons that are maybe a little bit spoilery to go into, it is not a natural segue for, we finished Fall of Plaguestone, now let's go play this thing. For two reasons. One, it's set in a very different part of the world. It's set in the Mwangi Expanse. And two, there is a fundamental assumption in this adventure that this curse turning people to oozes is something that some people are subject to, but your characters are not subject to. And that makes you some of the only people that can do something about it.
So what sort of challenges can players expect when they're playing this particular one? And it starts at 5th level, you said, right?
That's correct. Well, I mean, oozes for for one thing. one of the things that's really fun about setting this in the city of Kibwe, which is a very cosmopolitan city in the Mwangi Expanse, is that I can throw in an awful lot of different creature types. So if you go from fighting, golems on one hand to boggards on the other hand to demon worshipping cultists on the other hand, it doesn't seem as jarring as it might be when you're in a location that is expressly indicated to cater to lots of different kinds of creatures. It is a little bit investigation. It's got sort of a classic villainous organization, the Aspis Consortium, that you're going up against. So even if you're not members of the Pathfinder Society, that doesn't mean that you're going to get along with the Aspis Consortium. They've got their villainy is not constrained to just opposing the Pathfinder Society. And so that's a fun aspect of this as well.
Well, if the Aspis is going to be involved, would this be an adventure that could very easily tie into the society, if you wanted it to?
Yes, and that we can tie anything into society, right? One of the ways that we've been about tying some of the adventure paths, even. But this one in particular, I think I'm really excited to have Pathfinder Society characters play. People that have had 5 levels to build up to not much liking the Aspis Consortium will find a lot of love for villains they love to hate here.
Mentioned...
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead with the question.
Kitsune Warlock in chat is asking if the Ooze Morph archetype will appear in the adventure.
No, I don't call it that. It has a different name than that.
Oh, wonderful. Can you give its name?
No, because
okay.
I don't remember it. It is. I did write and turn over an archetype that gives you like ooze-related powers that you can only get if you've been subjected to experimentation or transmutation or gross sliminess of oozes or slimes or aberrations or the like. And that's kind of fun because it's interesting to be able to say, oh, wow, you just came out of this fight with these, I don't know, black pudding, gelatinous cube, whatever, when you were like 3rd level. Oh, what does that do for me? It's like, oh, now there's this new thing you get to take.
You seem to have made chat very happy. Kitsune Warlock is talking about blasphemers of the Goo Claw, and the Goo Claw lives. The Ooze Morph was actually the surprise hit of the later part of 2nd edition, and I was a big fan of it too. So it's kind of good to see at least some shadow of it coming forward in the 2nd edition. And speaking of things coming forward into 2nd edition, towards the last part of 1st edition, the Mwangi Expanse was getting a lot of attention. We got to see a lot of the I'm going to absolutely butcher some of these names, but Archmage Jatumbe and his Magabi warriors were giving a lot of attention. We got to see the Anasi and Grandmother Spider. Age of Ashes ties heavily into Mwangi, and this adventure ties into Mwangi. What is it about the Mwangi Expanse that makes it such a good tapestry for adventures and play that people may not have known about or should really explore?
Well, there are a couple of things. So two good answers to that question. First, it's exciting for us to be delving into non-Western mythologies and traditions, right? So it's sort of interesting if you've got angels and demons who fight against each other, but if you're also talking about, well, I've got the ability to bring forth my spirit face and speak to the bush spirits and negotiate passage through the wild lands of spirit. I mean, that's a new fun kind of thing to be able to play with. So there's a lot of mythology that's really interesting to play with there. The second point is that when we were building up the world of Galarian, there are some things that we dropped a little bit of focus on that we either didn't like or thought we could do better. And one of those, I think, was that the Mwangi Expanse was initially given sort of an outside-in perspective. Here is what people who visit the Mwangi Expanse see it like. And so what telling stories in the Mwangi Expanse today lets us do is see it from the inside out. Here is what the people in Kibwe feel is important. Here's what life is like living in their city. Um, and so that lets us get a different perspective on the storytelling as well. And that coupled with a lot of new mythologies to be able to delve into and to create is just really makes it a really exciting place to be.
Speaking of Kibwe, what kind of support does Kibwe and then the kind of surrounding regions have? Do you have like a city article or like a gazetteer of the region? Or what kind of stuff can people expect to read to learn more about the Mwangi here?
The city itself is going to get a gazetteer in the back of the Slithering adventure. You can read about Kibwe already in the Lost Omens World Guide. 'Cause it talks about some of the highlights there, and I really took that, and then I took the information about the city that was in an older product of ours, Heart of the Jungle, in order to pull forward. Interestingly, Heart of the Jungle was a very interesting product in that it had maps of a lot of cities in the Mwangi Expanse, but about half of them were sort of typical city maps, and the other half of them were just sketches, like you might find. Like a GM could say, "Here's a
Hmm.
sketch of the city that you find." And Kibwe's map was the latter kind. So to create sort of what Kibwe looks like from a more uh, from a perspective more useful to a GM, what I had to start with was this old sketch, and that felt kind of really cool to be able to build off of all the different neighborhoods and so on.
All right. So, what do you've managed to do a lot in Age of Ashes, and you went through the Extinction Curse as a developer. When you're writing uh the Slithering, what lessons have you learned about writing for second edition from the previous experiences that we're going to be able to see in this adventure?
Whew. Um, the hardest lessons that I've had is in taking first edition products, either that I've done for my own company, Run Amok Games, or working with other people, in order to update them to second edition, or in a couple of cases, take some second edition stuff and then be able to prepare first edition rules for it, so it's useful for those people who haven't made the switch. And that really highlights to me translations from one edition to another. Really highlight to me some of the differences. The differences in encounter design. It's an entirely different concept of what is fair to fight. Um, just as a basic example, if you're a bunch of sixth level characters, a fair fight in first edition is one will-o-wisp, and in second edition it is two will-o-wisps. Right? It is twice as much stuff to be a fair and balanced fight, and that makes it really hard to translate directly across. Um, and it's something I know a lot of people do. I mean, even on the fly as they run stuff, and I find that kind of intimidating, just because the encounter design just feels different. I mean, but it's the same translating across a lot of games. A fifth edition D&D encounter is going to feel differently based on the number of monsters. Um, so trying to get that feel is a little bit harder. Uh, the appropriate rewards is a little hard to translate across. It doesn't translate right across, not just because a magic item is of a different value in a new system, but because what they expect players to be able to have and use as they level up is different.
So does that also apply to some of the old benchmarks we're used to of you don't really need to worry about flying till this level and you don't need to worry about teleporting till that level, or is it something more basic than
No, I think that's fair, and I think there's probably some edges there that aren't yet clear. Aren't yet clear even to us. So we would be able to say before it's like, well, people aren't going to be able to regularly fly until their fifth level. To use your example, but in first edition, all right, well, yeah, but if you're also a gnome who is small enough and took a rock, the bird, as an animal companion,
that?
then you can actually at first level be able to fly and carry maybe enough arrows if your strength score allows it to be able to shoot a massive scorpion to death from the air before it can respond. Um, so I think that we haven't yet been able to suss out some of those weird corner cases, but I think a lot of the commonalities are still there.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a meme going around on Twitter recently about if you're a gnome and you reduce person, you technically weigh less enough to fly with Mage Hand. Um, so, Luis, you've been doing a lot of adventure writing. What's your opinion on some of this? Like, what lessons have you learned working with the adventure paths and writing PFS scenarios? I know that you've been heavily involved as well.
Uh, it turns out that uh, a challenging fight. If you look at the core rule book, it says something might be a moderate challenge, then severe and extreme. Severe and extreme are accurate words. They are no joke. Just having a single solo boss monster that is even just severe is a heck of a difference compared to something that was 2 CR higher than the average party level in first edition, and those numbers are the kind that will still get crits plenty of times and then have AC high enough that the party mage might not hit very accurately with all of their cantrips or something like that. So the fighter will have some hard time with hitting. So just even recognizing that no, they mean severe and extreme when they put those there, it's pretty important to figure out.
My players learned that lesson the very hard way in Age of Ashes recently. What about you, Ron? The encounter balance that you mentioned that it being different. So, do you think that it's leaning more towards lots of monsters or big monster?
I think it's leaning more towards big monsters. You can actually still build both, right?
Mhm.
Just like you could before. One thing that has surprised me is the Extinction Curse campaign that I'm running is, I mean, it varies between, I mean, I've got as many as up to 8 players who can drop in, but I generally run for a group of about 6. In first edition, I really felt like I needed to bulk up encounters that were written for 4 players to challenge 6 players. And in second edition, that seems less necessary. That is to say, the fact that a challenging encounter for a group of 4 characters is really sort of still just hard to hit and to make saves against for a higher number of characters means that I don't have to be adding much more to keep the challenge high for them. That surprised me.
Well, we are coming up on time for this interview. Where can people see you this con season?
Alrighty, well, I'm definitely going to be at PaizoCon and Gen Con, and I'll be wearing the blue Paizo polo shirts in order to be findable. Um, and I think that generally, if you just look for the shiniest, baldest head, that's either me or it's Jake Tondro, and you can say, "Hey, where's Ron?" and he'll point you to me. But the but I'm always happy to talk to people that want to come up, have questions, ask about the process, or talk about experiences they've had with the stuff that I've written or developed. That's a ton of fun. I love that. I'm really energized by being able to go to these conventions. Those are the 2 that I have in mind. I might be able to pick up the occasional weekend one as an attendee. At the end of this month, I'm going to be out at C2E2 in Chicago as an attendee. So I'll certainly be around.
Mhm. And if any of our listeners wanted to follow some of your work or see some of your other projects, what could they look forward to out there? Where can they find it?
I have fun stuff. So on Twitter, I am RPG Ron Lundeen. And my third-party publishing company is Run Amok Games. Run Amok Games has always been sort of my avenue to sort of kick out adventures when, you know, Paizo and other companies weren't expecting enough of me from an adventure perspective. I'd create them for my own and put them out. But one thing that I've really embraced in the past year and a half or so is a very active blog on that that's intentionally geared for people who are writing RPG adventures in Pathfinder, Starfinder, D&D. And so I'm on at least a couple times a week with some useful things. I mean, everything from here's how to do a real deep dive into a monster stat block to here's the right way to draw an angled corridor to here's an entire second edition adventure path from first through 20th level that I just wrote and gave away to you for free.
That
Whoa.
angled corridor article was gold. Yeah, definitely everybody, if you haven't been reading Ron's blog, you need to read Ron's blog. Even if you're not writing, it gives you a lot of insight as to what some of the meta thoughts going on behind the material you're using. It's just fascinating.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ron. We definitely look forward to seeing some more of your work. I definitely look forward to reading through Extinction Curse, and I am going to be hard pressed not to run Slithering when it comes out. So yeah, I'm all over that. I am all over that.
It will have a ton of surprises, a lot of fun. There are a lot of things about the Slithering to being able to talk about when it gets a little closer to having that released.
Wonderful. All right, everyone. We will be right back with our news and banter right after this.
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
And we're back. Welcome to the news segment of No Direction. We're here to talk about the big events, announcements, and goings on in the Paizo and Pathfinder world. And right now, one of the biggest goings on is, of course, the Wrath of the Righteous Kickstarter, which has already been a wild success. It's raised more money than the original Kingmaker, and we're talking about the Owlcat video games Kickstarter, and they're going through like crazy stretch goals. There's a big they're trying to start a big old fight on what extra heritage they're going to add to the game. They announced that turn-based combat is going to be in the game by default as one of the options. It's lots of exciting stuff. We don't want to go too much into this because we actually have spoken with Owlcat very recently. We have a very long interview, very insightful, that you will be able to listen to later on in this week. So definitely do check that out. Luis, what do you think about the Owlcat games?
I mean, it's really exciting. I was a big fan of Kingmaker when it came out, more so when I discovered the turn-based mod. Not to
So
disparage on their game, but Pathfinder kind of evokes a certain type of game in mind, and turn-based gets a lot closer to the way it plays on the tabletop. So just, yeah, knowing about Wrath of the Righteous is it's great. I mean, if my history with Wrath of the Righteous is such that we hit Mythic, and then things kind of petered out after that. Not because of the Mythic rule set, just because of life, but reading through the Mythic rules, I realized, oh, my wizard will reach a point where I don't need the party anymore. It can just be me. So hopefully a second chance to kind of work on that and make that better balance for the video game experience is just something that's exciting, especially because I mean at this point they're at $1.2 million. I'm sure they're gonna have enough to make that game just amazing.
Yeah, I mean the original ask was just what 300,000, which was half of what they asked for Kingmaker, and a lot of that makes sense. This is going to be using the Kingmaker engine, a lot of the assets, a lot of the cost of developing a game like this has already been paid because of all the work they did to make Kingmaker go. This is some of the advantages of the video game industry where you get to reuse a lot of your previous work. But man, it seems to be much more successful than Kingmaker
Took off
ever was.
Instantly.
Yeah,
and there's still 20 days to go.
Oh, I know. Good grief. I am definitely looking forward to see what they come with. And I don't mind talking about this Kickstarter. We've kind of gotten gun shy talking about Kickstarters lately because of, some high profile failing Kickstarters and disappointments out there. And really, Kickstarter itself has sort of become kind of a bad word in gaming circles sometimes. But this is an established company that already knocked it out of the park, delivered on time and in spades. So I have very little doubt that this is going to come out well, come out somewhere close to when they say it will. Nothing ever comes out on time, and will be great. I also discovered the turn-based mod this weekend when I read about that it was going to come in and it was a mod. I went out and found the mod, installed it, and started a new Kingmaker playthrough. And like I liked Kingmaker a lot. Okay, so I was a big fan of Kingmaker, but I'm having a lot more fun with the turn-based mod.
It's almost night and day.
Oh, I
It
feel
just
it was so chaotic because it was that real time with pause thing that the BioWare games had, and I know why they went with that, because they really wanted to invoke that
Baldur's
BioWare
Gate.
Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape tournament vibe, and they really did, to the point that they copied the cursor animations. They knew what game they were making.
So the little gauntlet.
Mm-hmm. And the little 4 pie squares for movement are the exact same.
Yeah.
And in those games too, it was hectic for me. I was constantly just slamming the spacebar every couple of seconds to reassign what orders I was giving. But going to turn-based is just so much more relaxing. It is really playing just like Pathfinder. It's doing exactly what I want it to do. I'm so familiar with that game. It's just like a warm blanket that I'm wearing and just relaxing and having a wonderful time. John Bastille in chat is saying turn-based mod ? Yes, absolutely. If you have Kingmaker, and right now you can actually get Kingmaker stupidly cheap by going to Humble Bundle. They have it as part of their Humble Choice, which is like a different amounts of money you can pledge to choose from a bunch of games. And it's one of the games this month. So even if you pick the smallest tier, which I think is like $6, you can choose it as one of your unlock games. So like you could have Kingmaker right now for less than $6. And then
the only
I
was gonna say the only kind of trouble with that is if you're not used to modding a game and all that involves, it can be kind of an obstacle to get past. It kind of hurdle if you're not used to doing that.
So I will give some advice right now for anybody rushing out to get the mod Kingmaker, because I just did it this weekend. I ran into a little bit of trouble that I don't. The Nexus mods is where the mods live for this game. It's where the mods live for a lot of games. And the turn-based mod and a bunch of the mods require a meta mod called the Unity Mod Manager, which you'll see this a lot of times in games where the mod makers get together, they get behind a central mod that takes care of a lot of the same boring functions that all the mods kind of want to do. So instead of spending all their effort rewriting the same code, there's like this one neutral mod, and then they all sort of play and pull off of it. Unity Mod Manager for Kingmaker is that mod. Currently, the most recent version of that you will see on the mod page is broken for a lot of users. You want to go back one version to the one that was released in September and use that mod for now. It will probably be patched in short order. It's being frequently updated right now. But you want to use the September release if you're going to use the turn-based combat mod. Otherwise, it seems to, for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, crash on startup. But once you get that mod, and there's also like a ton of other mods, they add whole classes to the game and that you can get in there. Like the portrait pack is basically a necessity, because as much as I like Kingmaker, its portrait selection was not great for the opening list.
2 dozen, 3 dozen at most.
Yeah, and it's actually fairly easy to make your own portrait file and just throw them in there if you want to use some art that you found or have had commissioned, or you just took some really cool pictures of the miniature you painted up and you want to use that for your character art. But there's like, on Nexus mods, there's like 1,000 portrait packs, usually pulled from other Infinity Engine games. I swear they've been porting those same Baldur's Gate portraits to every single game that is even remotely like it since the beginning of time.
The other mod I would recommend to go alongside with the turn-based mod is one called Camera Rotation, just because the game by default is kind of locked into this isometric one particular angle, but the game becoming so much more tactical in turn-based mode, it benefits a lot to be able to turn the camera and see where is that enemy hiding, how can I walk over to get to them, and things like that. I feel like it helps a lot.
There's also a mod, I forget the name of it, but it's like literally the most popular mod on the server right now, except for that portrait pack, which is actually the most popular mod on Nexus right now.
Makes sense.
Which is basically a cheat menu, which is super useful in this game if you run into any bugs or you
bag of tricks.
Yeah. or if you just run into a bump and you want to nudge the game, it's useful to have that tool for a game this complicated and this long and this large with this many mods and updates. Things can go wrong or things can go contrary to the way you want to enjoy the game. And having that available, even if you don't intend to like cheat code the heck out of the game, just having that available is super useful in case you need to fall back on it. And I know that there's a specific issue with, it's very easy to begin Kingmaker and not start the game with the cleric. And that is really crippling to a lot of playthroughs because you can get a cleric, but it actually takes a while. And if you don't have somebody to heal, some of those early combat encounters get tough. If you can't remove conditions, a lot of those early combat encounters get super deadly. You learn to become afraid of blindness. So one of the things I often do is if I end up with an alignment or a party crew where I don't get one of the Inquisitor or the Cleric out of the gate, is I just throw enough money using the cheat menu to immediately just create a Cleric and just begin the game with one. I think you can even, like, if you do it right, you don't even need to do that because that first level, they're not super expensive. And in the tutorial adventure, it's possible to get enough money to just hire one outright. But I definitely recommend that if you don't have a cleric, use the NPC at the trading post to hire a cleric that you create yourself. It will make the game a lot easier for you. Now, this isn't necessary if you began the game with one of the other NPCs. You can get a cleric depending on how you answer some questions at the beginning of the game. Anything
What's next?
Okay, yes. Also, and I need to pull this up, Paizo very recently had a stream, and by recently, I mean while I was driving to get to this and make it happen.
3 hours ago. Wow.
Yes, 3 hours ago, where they were talking about what some announcements for Society. And Society, of course, is super important. Some disclaimers. I'm a Society volunteer. I'm a venture officer. Luis, you have written for Society and everything else going, and you're employed by Paizo. Here's our normal disclaimer of we are the incredibly biased Pathfinder podcast. We like this game a lot. And because we like this game, many of us have been employed by Paizo. I think at this point, Paizo has hired everyone on the network for one reason or the other at this point. And also, you all just keep doing great stuff. So they are currently looking for volunteers for con season. There is still a way to get Starfinder and first edition boons, even if you're doing second edition games. Obviously, because second edition is the new hotness, there's a lot of push to run second edition content at these conventions, especially the big boys, the PaizoCon, the Gen Con, the Origins, like the PAX Unplugs, like the big boys. The conventions, they definitely want to do that. There's some Starfinder news, and Thirsty has gone wild again. We will talk about that in the next in the next No Direction Beyond. And that's everything.
They had a new hiring too, I think, since officially announced.
Who's the new hiring? They didn't announce it, but I don't have it here.
It's on the blog but I think they're of course my Paizo webpage is taking a bit to load up.
The new OPC assistant.
New OPC assistant named Alex Spidell from Cleveland, Ohio, is joining the team.
Fantastic. We have been very critical on the podcast. I very much did a couple of episodes ago a sorry I'm about to be the bad guy segment where I was like, OP needs more resources because it's such an important part of the game. Mm-hmm. So I'm very glad to see new hires and new resources going to organized play, because in my opinion, it is one of the most important aspects of Pathfinder, Starfinder for getting new people involved in this game and keeping the people you've got. Because one of the lessons I've learned running game stores successfully, I ran a game store for 10 years successfully, which is not easy to do today. And that is that if you do not support the games that you want to sell, nobody will buy the games that you sell, because nobody wants to pay and invest into a game system that they do not know that they will be able to play. And one of the ways to make it obvious that this isn't a wasted investment is good organized play activities, tournaments, game nights, convention play. If without these things, it's really hard to recruit for games unless you happen to be the number one game in your market. And Pathfinder, as much as we wish it was, is currently not the number one game in the RPG market. It has ceded that ground to 5th edition, and so it has become even more important for the OP programs to get the support, to get the love, to get the advertisement, and to get the quality development it needs in order to keep this game strong. I mean, do you disagree with me on that, Luis?
No, not at all. I'd say it's the lifeblood of the community. I mean, the most of the biggest portions of the community are kind of attached and surround the organized play systems. Not to say that there aren't other aspects of the community that that pulls in, that the game pulls in, but that's kind of the core group of people who are always playing the game, always supporting it.
Yeah, and like I said, some disclaimer: I am a OP officer. I'm directly involved in promoting and pushing these efforts, but I do so because I love the game and I want to see the game flourish and expand. And even if you're not interested in playing an organized play yourself, organized play grows the game and the player base and expands its reach. So even if you only care about your home games or running the adventure paths or reading the web fiction, I would have said reading the novels, but we missed the novel. Those things all get better the more people care about the game and play the game, and OP is one of the best ways to expand that reach. So wonderful time there. And I'm out of news, unless Luis, you know of any news that happened this week.
I don't have Pathfinder related news, but it is RPG, tabletop RPG related news. There's, according to the d20radio.com article that I'm looking at, that say they have independently confirmed it looks like Fantasy Flight Games is officially shuttering their RPG development.
Yeah,
which is a huge shame, big bummer.
It is very bad. I mean, they were what, the number 3 company, number 4 company in RPGs?
They always had a game consistently within the top 5 for the ICV2.
Yeah,
typically Star Wars was up there.
And we kind of saw some hints of this a couple of episodes ago. We started talking about layoffs in that industry, and of course our hearts always go out to the people affected by these decisions. This is not a very easy industry to make a living in, even under the best of circumstances. So we definitely hope that those affected by this manage to land on their feet and find some places. There are some incredibly talented people involved in these games. The Star Wars game was incredibly well done in a drastic departure of the assumption of what an RPG should look like. It really expanded and pushed boundaries. Fantasy Flight has always done top-notch quality products, Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, Star Wars. And to see them backing out of the industry entirely is kind of depressing.
Yeah.
They're huge. I mean, I know that I cannot understand the motives on this. I do know that the RPG industry is not the giant cash cow lots of people wished it was. I would imagine your average RPG fan does not know how little money there isn't in the industry. But I still like seeing quality products being made. What's your opinions here, Luis?
I mean, it could be any number of reasons why things are closing up shop there. I mean, even if you have a successful RPG, that doesn't mean you're making a lot. And if you are someone like Fantasy Flight, who's also focusing on board games, which are probably pulling in a lot more money than your RPGs are, I can understand maybe wanting to shift resources on that. And if you're also owned by a parent company like Asmodee, it might be up to them. It might not be Fantasy Flight that's wanting to do this. It could be any number of reasons. I just hope that anyone that is at all interested in tabletop RPGs does check out their Star Wars RPG, which then spun off into the more generic, kind of broader Genesis system, or their Legend of the Five Rings RPG. Those are all great games that I think anyone should check out. Whether or not you're into just like the typical fantasy fair stuff, these are just interesting games from a mechanics level. I think that kind of get you away from the typical D20 based systems. They have kind of proprietary dice that are more interesting in some cases, I think, than just the typical D20 fair that you're used to playing over the past, I guess at this point, 40 years.
Yeah. And I mean, you were talking about Star Wars, Legend of the Five Rings. These are some beloved IPs in the role-playing game industry. I mean,
and then the Star Wars is like the biggest name out there, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a bit of a growing concern for when Starfinder was launching that sci-fi RPGs don't make money, because look how much trouble even Star Wars RPGs have had, and it's the best franchise you could probably go after if you wanted to do something sci-fi. I mean, maybe Star Trek, but honestly, Star Trek games seem to undersell compared to Star Wars games. And, to see that even that wasn't enough to keep a company like Fantasy Flight Games interested in that face. And then, of course, the irony is that Starfinder did like ridiculously good, like few other sci-fi games have ever done before. Yay, go Starfinder. Still. Whew. Man, I wonder what's going to happen to those IPs too, because Fantasy Flight has locked up that Star Wars IP. Could this be a signal that they're not going to be doing that anymore? Or
I mean, I'm sure their board games are just massively successful. They have 4 or 5 different board games that are Star Wars based, that are living board games that are continually supported with expansions and the like. So I'm sure those are doing great. It might be that maybe Disney decides technically tabletop RPGs is something that can be broken off and kind of licensed again somewhere else, and maybe someone else will snag that. Who knows? We'll see. Kind of curious what's happening with Legend of the Five Rings, though, considering that is a kind of newer game. I think they only have a handful of books in place at this point, and it sounds like they're looking to wrap up whatever books are in production now. But Star Wars, at the very least, has a lot of support where if the game is ending, at the very least you have dozens of books to kind of finish up and kind of flesh out everything you need. L5R has very little to work with.
And we've heard, if you've listened to any of our con recordings or some of our interviews with people like Lisa Stevens, the owner of one of the owners of Paizo, or Owen Casey Stevens, who very famously worked on the D20 incarnations of Star Wars. That licensing with Star Wars specifically can be a bit of a mess, and it also seems kind of fickle that it could just disappear on you in an instant without you even knowing it's happening, because we've heard stories of that happening again and again with people who have held that license. But we are operating on no information more than what we've been able to provide you. We're just doing podcast conjecture at this point. Yeah. Our opinions are not informed. Well, they're informed slightly, but not in knowledge that would absolutely help us here.
I'm guessing if there is a chance to keep the tabletop RPG license for Star Wars, it's gonna be a hot commodity very soon.
Yep. I mean, famously, Lisa Stevens told the story about how she drove to get the license and was stopped at the gate to inform that somebody beat her to it.
Wow. Jeez. Yeah, so very hot commodity, especially right now, considering how successful the newer movies have been.
I know, like I'm kind of surprised. Like, it does seem that Star Wars, the tide has turned for a little bit with the last Star Wars movie, the Last Jedi, people were a little bit worried about the future of the brand. I don't agree with a lot of the opinions that were being tossed around there, but you definitely saw like geek culture as a whole kind of cool on Star Wars as a brand. But this last year, with The Mandalorian, the newest movie being quite a bit of a success financially, critically, that lots of people agree and disagree. I very much enjoyed the crap out of it, and the new Star Wars game from Electronic Arts, being absolutely fantastic. So it seems like Star Wars is hot again. People want to do that Star Wars stuff. So, man, I hope somebody is producing Star Wars RPG material, because there's definitely an audience for it.
I don't know if it was talked about on the last episode, but there was a big update to the Pathfinder Society character, the additional resources
Okay.
that went up on the blog that basically brought in all the Lost Omens books, including Gods and Magic, which had just come out the day before, all at once. They had all been, they're now in the additional resources. So there's a huge batch of options that are suddenly available to people. And it looks like they even talked about the achievement point system and what it's going to look like. Looks like we're hopefully not too far away from it going live. They've given values of how much it going to take to play a Leshy or a Hobgoblin, stuff like that. So
how much
looks like things are finally moving on that front.
You have that available? How much will it take to play a Leshy?
Oh, I think it's something like 80 points for a Hobgoblin, which unfortunately, because I don't play too much Society right now, I don't have any context as to what that exactly means. How many games?
120 according to Kitsune Warlock in chat.
120, there you go.
Oh, how many I'm not really familiar with the calculations on these points. How many points? How do you earn these points? How many do you get?
I think you earn some points for playing a game, but you earn more if you're a GM to kind of encourage people to at least run a game, or even a quest to get a few extra points. But probably you got to do at least, I don't know, dozen or so to get close to that. I couldn't tell you exactly myself.
Kitsune Warlock, you seem to have all the answers, or at least have the document at hand, so do let us know. I hope I've got enough points to make a Leshy. Not to bash on lizard folk or hobgoblins, but I can't put potions in my head if I'm a hobgoblin.
Yeah. So I mean, lots of big stuff on the organized play front, and I guess anyone that was wanting to catch up on the news from a few hours ago can hop onto the Paizo Twitch and catch the replay of that.
And we also were informed that it will be in the blog by the time you're listening to this, if you're not viewing it live. So all that information.
They tend to put their blogs up on Thursdays. So
yep. It looks like it's 1 point per quest, so I bet it's 4 points for playing. It's 1 per hour is probably okay. So you earn 12 points for GMing a scenario at a Premier Plus convention, Gen Con.
Like probably Gen Con or PaizoCon.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Cool.
Okay, so everybody go volunteer. Go volunteer. Be a tier 1 GM. Sorry.
In theory, if you volunteer your entire Gen Con, you're pretty close to getting that Hobgoblin.
Oh, yeah, because you can do up to 9 as a tier 1 GM at Gen Con. So why is Hobgoblin so much more expensive than the others?
I'm guessing it's because Hobgoblins in the setting are kind of isolated to that one small nation of Oprak for the moment. They're not as prevalent as a Leshy could be, that can kind of sprout from anywhere. I don't know. So, yeah, and also it looks like you can only purchase a single Hobgoblin. You can't make multiple Hobgoblins.
Whoa, but you can play unlimited Leshies and Lizard Folk.
Yeah, so it is very much an exclusive ancestry. So make sure you have the right character in mind for your Hobgoblin if you decide to make that.
So, Luis.
Yeah.
Now that we're out of the news segment, it's time to talk about the banter. And we haven't had you on the show in a while where you weren't repping the Paizo flag. So what kind of
Yes.
games are you running? Like, what is your current playtime looking like? Or do you just only do official stuff?
Oh no. I feel like I'm an oddity among the Paizo staff in that I get to play a lot of games, and not just a single maybe office game. I run a lot of stuff just because I feel like I end up GMing a lot more things and end up enjoying it more. I was running Return of the Rune Lords first edition for some of the crew in the office, which included uh, Eleanor and Mike Sayer, and at the time, Owen Stevens was part of it. But we have just finished up the third book on that. We've been at it for over a year. Unfortunately, schedules are such that meeting up pretty regularly doesn't happen too often, especially right around the winter time when holidays and blah blah blah. But we've been playing at it for so long, we reached a point where everyone decided, I think we would like to switch over to second edition. So we're going to finish Return of the Rune Lords, the second half of the AP, in second edition,
Oh,
starting in the next few weeks. So that actually required me to figure out, okay, well, if they're going to be 12th level, how much money should they have? And what gear should they have that they had in first edition but didn't have, that won't have in second edition, maybe? Like the Rod of Wonder suddenly became a rare item in 2E.
mm-hmm.
Who gets that? Should I even give it to them anymore? Of course, I'm giving them the Rod of Wonder. It's fun. So yeah, that's going over. And then every other Tuesday, I'm in part of an office game run by Jason Keeley, where he's converting Strange Aeons to second edition. And I'm playing my fighter, who I played as part of the playtest for a while and then kind of de-leveled so I could play in this AP. She's all about armor and shields and stuff, really tough character. I have a game that I've been running since the playtest, actually, where I've been converting Runes of Azlance over to the playtest and now second edition, which is about halfway through. And then on occasional Friday nights, every other Friday, I'm in a game run by a guy named Lundeen, where we're not playing Pathfinder, actually. We're playing this other game called Torg. I don't know if you've heard of the other role-playing game. But it's kind of this giant mishmash of lots of genres. It takes place on Earth in a time where parallel versions of Earth are invading, and North America is being invaded by like the primal Land of the Lost style stuff, where lizard folk with spears roam the land, and Europe has been taken over by the cyber papacy, where God is the internet and is law, and Egypt is run by like pulp heroes, and there's all these different types of genres mishmashed all together, and the rules are such that you can make a character from any of those and then just go adventure with the rest of them. So you can be a pulpy hero in the cyberland who is actually fighting alongside a lizard folk person.
Okay,
So I get to play a lot of fun stuff.
That sounds about as wild as the things I hear that the Paizo crew enjoy. I mean, you all do seem that the company seems, I'm going to say you all, but the company seems to have at least had an obsession with very pulpy, very out there stories and adventures in the past, and it still sort of bleeds its way through. Because what was one of the Extinction Curse volume, like Invasion of the Dinosaurs?
Siege of the Dinosaurs.
Siege of the Dinosaurs.
which is a B monster movie title if I've ever heard one.
Absolutely. Which is making me wonder if even that ties into Wongi, because that's where most of the times I've encountered dinosaurs in Pathfinder have been, is like near Sargova. So I don't know. We don't know. I mean, you might know, but you can't say.
Well, from what Ron told us, it's all on the Isle of Cortos. So
good point. Good point. Dinosaurs on the Isle of Cortos. I mean,
he said you do go underground at some point. So
some Super Land of the Lost stuff is very much a possibility there. Some Hollow Earth coolness could happen.
How about you, Perram? I know you're also in plenty of games.
Yeah, my Age of Ashes game has taken a turn for the odd.
Odder than the full plate mail wizard.
Yeah. Odder than that, because oh man, it just. So I've got a story to tell about this full plate mail. Okay. One of his backstories, he's a dwarven full plate wizard, and one of his character details that he's done a really good job of playing is that his family runs like a different type of brewery, and they do a lot of experimental brews, and he sort of comes to the game with these like really cool, inventive drinks that he is pitching to various merchants and people he runs into to sort of like spread the family business. And it's things like pickled owlbear eggs, and then like cracked over vodka set aflame, or lots of weird fantasy stuff. But he does a really good job of pitching these, and he's been doing it since the game began. Nobody has really taken him up on the offer until they meet this Goblin King, the end of book 1. And do you know the Goblin King I'm talking about?
Yep.
Okay, so there is this really big monster. We sort of talked about this before, as this monster really wrecked my PCs last time. So we have talked about this on the show. But the event that happened was that the bard goes out and sits in the audience of his skeletal goblin court, and just starts chatting with him. And he's crazy, so that works for a little while. And he starts acing his diplomacy and deception rolls, because this dude built like the bardiest bard that ever barded, and is having great luck, and he's throwing hero points at me at left and right to sort of make this thing work. And 20 minutes worth of role playing is happening. Everybody's having a good time. And he eventually brings in the dwarf to sort of talk as well. And he's because this Goblin King expressed the desire to get a drink. He wanted elven blood wine, which just really means he wanted to drink elf blood. But so he's like, I have a dude that knows drinks. He come in here and he's like, okay, pitch him a drink. And he gets into his spiel. He pulls out his list, and then the Goblin King was like, absolutely, I'll have that one. And then the player was like, I don't actually have these on me. They're made at like, and so the bard just like, I give it up. You can eat him. And then that's how that started. And it was wonderful, and it was crazy, and I was having a great time. But after they have wrapped that up, they have a castle. This is kind of hinted at, and it has been talked about in a lot of things. So my party has a castle, and they're very much wanting to restore this castle, but also through events and some fun role-playing that has happened, they also are in the possession of 300 loyal goblins. Which is proven to actually be more of a challenge than a benefit for them. Yes, they get lots of nice free work crews to help fix up this castle, and then also mess up this castle in almost equal measures. But they have to sort of deal with the fact that they've got this group of goblins. And it all came about because they told one of the goblins during that they meet as part of this adventure is like, hey, we're here to save the day and all that stuff. We're here to help the goblins out as part of this castle for reasons that I don't want to spoil. And then one of them told the goblins to go get all the other goblins. And they took that quite literally and got all the other goblin tribes in anywhere near the area. So now the game has sort of become SimCity Goblin Edition, where they are building neighborhoods for the goblins to live in, and they're trying to organize the goblin society, and they're talking about, well, like, should we discourage the worship of Zarganel, or is that just sort of imposing our belief structure on the goblins unfairly? And how on earth do you keep these things from burning their own houses down? And lots of fun times that have gone absolutely nowhere near where this adventure is supposed to go. And I keep pointing out that there's this magic portal in your basement, and maybe there's more adventure in that direction. And nope, it's all about making awesome goblin village and getting these kobolds to start teaching architecture classes. And they built a vocational school for the goblins to teach them how to farm and burn things in a way that doesn't hurt the town but helps the town. And like, I'm just going with it. I'm having fun with it. but this has stopped being Age of Ashes. This
That-
is something else.
That sure sounds like things that players do.
I know.
I mean, whenever you're ready, I think as a GM, you have full right to have something come out of the portal and get
Yeah.
the adventure going again.
I did that, and you know
Oh,
what
you-
you know what they did?
What's
Well,
that?
evidently, they had enough money to buy 36 of the frost bombs, and then
Okay.
lined up the portal room with 50 goblins, each armed with a frost bomb, and a coordinated toss.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what happened to the thing that had come out of that.
So they
portal.
have a goblin security system.
Yes, and this isn't. I'm not letting them abuse it and get like I occasionally let them get some advantage from this nonsense.
Sure.
And I'm in equal measure making this like the challenge. It's like you have taken responsibility for this thing that you have no control over, and it's often just like, how do we stop them from eating all the dogs in town? And they have chased away all the horses and are demanding that the city only ride cows now, and all that stuff. But I really, really wish I could get them to go in the portal. Have you? How you said that this is just players doing player stuff? How do you get your crew on task when they have decided that the adventure is something else entirely, or do you just run with it?
You take an NPC they like and put them in danger. And suddenly when a friend is in danger, then, oh, hold on, we have to rescue our friend. Let's go do that.
Wonderful.
Typically tends to work. So if suddenly an entire tribe of goblins goes missing, who knows? Maybe they had to go investigate that.
Yes, and they do have a favorite goblin named Punchy. I will definitely be able to put Punchy in danger.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
It's very easy to do it. It's just when you wish to employ that tactic that really matters. It's how long you wish to let them to play around and think that they're safe and having fun.
Yes, Kitsonia Warlock, it is Punchy. He was partners with Bashalope, the other goblin that earned a name. But Bashalope has since died because traps deal more damage than goblins have hit points. And that's sort of how the way things go. So
is that the only gaming you're doing, Perram?
No, I'm also doing a home game of 2nd edition. That's a conversion of my home game that ran for 10 years and is still going.
Wow. That's great.
It almost, and in 1st edition, they made it all the way to level 6 in 10 years. Like, we are running that thing slow. It is a lot of the same nonsense of like roleplay heavy, let's start a business. And they kind of like that low level adventure. So they were on the slow XP track and they were really, really going for it. And
that's a little different than having an AP waiting for them on the other side of a portal.
Right. That's just like custom made for what they want to do. And like that group gets to play like once or twice a month. So, it moves at a slower pace. It used to be weekly. And it's kind of, I'm hoping to get it back to weekly again here soon because 2nd edition has kind of revived it. But you've talked about converting over to 2nd edition and converting at level 12, and that seems to have its own problems. But my group, for that group entirely, when I put it to them, it's like, hey, we can convert this over to 2nd edition. They're all on board for that. So you all are level 6, but let's like convert over to level 5 so we can like learn the system. And they're like, no, we really want to get the full experience. So we're just going to do
first level.
So like a 6-month time gap happens, and they invoke the use it or lose it rule of they all got rusty. And now they need to, now that they need to go adventure again, they need to remember how that goes. And they've started at 1st level again. And
that's actually pretty great. I think it's great that was their idea.
Yeah, and I'll let them pick one item from their characters to keep that they were, and come up with some sort of fair, balanced stat for it for 2nd edition. And one of them chose the bag of holding.
Sure. At least they didn't choose the handy haversack, which just isn't in the rules, it turns out. There'll be plenty of times when, while I'm doing my converted Runes of Aslant game, they said, "Oh, hey, what treasure do we find?" And I start reading off the treasure, expecting to be able to just turn back to the core rulebook and say, "Yeah, there it is," and suddenly having to realize, "Oh no, I have to figure out the mechanics for this item right now." So it's, yeah. The one thing about that is to kind of have a good idea of what is or isn't back in the game just yet.
You've got a bit of an advantage there. You've been running and converting and developing content for second edition since it was a thought.
Well, since I was there, I'm sure it was a thought many years before I was even there. But yeah, I've been with it for a while, and I feel like I've gotten to learn the system most through the conversion of the game. That's actually how I feel I picked up a lot of Pathfinder the first time around. Is I was converting the 3.5 APs to Pathfinder and having to understand, okay, how did these numbers exist and what do they mean in Pathfinder now? And eventually, I'd reach points where, oh, I want to have a boss battle and I don't have a thing in a bestiary. I'm going to stat up the NPC and try to convert it. That helped a lot to get me to understand how to create monsters and how the game really worked. So doing that again for 2E is just as fun the first time around, I think, but it's also a very informative process.
So what is I don't know that we've ever got it on air. I know we have gotten you to write some blog posts about it. So what is your overall thoughts on second edition? Like pro, con, don't like where do you fall on this?
I'm for the most part pretty pro on it. I had gotten really good at making first edition monsters to the point where, I give me 20 minutes and I'll have a monster for you. It might not have all the bells and whistles, but I'll have something for you. But that's mostly because of experience and practice, not because of, oh, look how easy and simple this is. And I remember when Starfinder first came out and I was learning to make those monsters and how that felt like it took forever. And nowadays it's like, oh yeah, that number, done. And with all that practice with Starfinder, it's very easy to translate that skill set over to second edition. It feels great. It lets me not worry about figuring out hit dice and skill ranks and the number of feats they have and all that stuff, when I can just pick out the numbers I want and then immediately go to, okay, now I get to come up with cool abilities. Okay, what can I do with 1 action or 3 actions or reactions and stuff like that? That's where I think the most fun is, both to design it and also for GMs to run and players to experience. So that's where you should be putting the most of your focus. At the new rule set with the GMG rules, it makes it very easy to do.
Yes. I very much. One more point from my side of the argument. I love the new monster rules, and you know that. I've been preaching that for years, ever since Unchained. And you say it exactly right. That's the cool thing. You get to just spend the time on the cool stuff and let the boring stuff get calculated by the table.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, not to say that I didn't also enjoy making 1E monsters, like learning the ins and outs of how hit dice and skill ranks and all these other things were connected helped me better understand the game. But I'm kind of over that at this point.
That's an experience you've had.
Yep.
I mean, we've all had.
I have enough 1E monsters under my belt for 100 different games at this point.
And you continue to make not 1E monsters, but monsters for us every other week on Monsters Physique.
Oh, every week, actually.
Every week on Monsters Physique, one of my favorite blogs.
Yes, every week. Maybe it's time to slow down. We'll see. But for now, I'm keeping up that pace because it's a lot faster to do nowadays.
Right, because even if you do a Starfinder one, it's a lot of the same process now.
And also, secret thing is I can take a lot of my 1E monsters from the blog and update them as 2E monsters and do a lot of the work. Hey, look, it's already done because I figured it out last time.
Awesome. So do you have any plans for any major gaming plans that you're allowed to talk about, or conventions or things you're really looking forward to coming up?
Major gaming stuff. I don't think. I mean, other than my work and my freelance writing, I don't think I have anything super big, exciting that I'm allowed to talk about. I have been working on some homebrew stuff recently. There was a long period of time where, because I was at Paizo and had first dibs on freelance stuff, I had a lot of freelance on my plate, and I decided to slow down on that. And now it's far more reasonable. I have a lot more free time to do other stuff that I want to do, like play video games, because I haven't been able to do that for a while, or even just like do like game writing or game design for myself. So I've been doing some homebrew stuff, coming up with new rule sets and systems that maybe I'll look to share in the coming weeks, maybe with No Direction fans. We'll see. And then just like homebrew, like setting design and stuff that hopefully maybe I can share that in the future, because I like it, and hopefully other people will like it. I'm sure there are plenty of third-party companies that are run by Owen Casey Stevens that will take my my stuff and want to sell it to other people.
Alrighty. Okay, everyone. I think that is where we're going to call it. We are going to be right back with the wrap-ups and shout-outs after this.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And we're back. Welcome to the wrap-ups and shout-outs section of the show, where we shout out to the things we want to put a spotlight on to, with projects we're involved with, things that seem really cool, or just things we didn't get a chance to talk about, or maybe not strictly related to Pathfinder. Luis, do you got anything you want to shout out to?
I'm going to toot my own horn just a little bit and shout out to the Pathfinder Society quest number 5, The Dragon Who Stole Evoking Day, written by a guy who has the same name as me, because I wrote it. I did. Yeah, it's a fun little quest, 1-hour quest, where it kind of evokes the themes and feel of, or hopefully evokes themes and feel of The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And just kind of a fun little thing for people who want to play a quest in Pathfinder Society and not commit to the whole full hour stint.
I need to run more quests and just sort of do game days, get people to sit down and play those. Because I find that my game groups that are like super dedicated, like we show up every other week to play Society because that's as often as you all release new content for it, are kind of more wanting to do like the big adventures, or they like to do all the quests at once, or like, quest packs or all at once. But I really like the idea of just like getting a crew together to play for an hour, and that's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One other good thing I've heard about the quests is just that it also is a great way to try to get a new GM to dip their toe into, or just a person to dip their toe into GMing, because GMing a full-on scenario as your first thing can be pretty daunting. But if it's okay, I think I can commit 1 hour to a game with one encounter and then see how I feel about it, and it's not as big of a leap into GMing, because okay, if I didn't do well or people didn't like it, it was only 1 hour of time and I didn't waste other people's time. And so it's definitely, I think, a good spot for people to try out GMing if they've been thinking about it, or maybe push people into doing it. They're like, hey, I want to play this, you should GM this.
Wonderful. Now, one of the things I want to shout out to, or really the only thing I want to shout out to right now, is the Advanced Occult Guide Kickstarter that Everyman Games, our own Alexander Agunis and own Casey Stevens are doing and working on and putting together. And my shout out here, besides the fact that this is a weird, crazy thing that he's been talking to me about for about a year now, is that I am gonna write some stuff for it if it funds. So I want to write some crazy monsters for this thing. So please, I hope it funds. Go see if this is something you might be interested in. It's the Advanced Occult Guide. It's for Starfinder. It's basically a lot of the weirdest, like, occulty, crazy transformation, supernatural stuff that's possible in the concepts of the game. And really, you see Alex Agunas really playing with rules and subsystems and inventing, bending the rules in ways that a lot of people wouldn't think to bend them, and it's always quite fun. So,
Perram, is this your first stab at freelancing for Starfinder?
for Starfinder, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some freelancing for other systems that I can't talk about, and I've done some freelancing for second edition for Legendary.
Cool, because I know for the longest time it felt like you were the one who hadn't dipped their toe into that yet on the network.
And I really don't want to dip my toe too far into it. I've kind of just been roped into some projects that personally excite me.
Mm-hmm. That's the fun thing about writing for third parties is you can kind of be as committed to them as you like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can find the little projects here and there that you find exciting and write for.
And I am unfortunately very, very busy, especially since like we're starting our 7th podcast. Not even talking about ones we haven't announced yet. Oh my goodness, I can't do any more podcasts. No more.
Except maybe if once the Slithering comes out, maybe we could do a one-time run the Slithering for Perram podcast. I'd be happy to run the Slithering for you and 3 of your friends from the No Direction Network.
That sounds really fun. I hope we get to do that. We can't talk and promise things. That would be really fun.
I will tempt you, though.
If that's something as an audience you would like to see us do go ahead and go to our Discord channel or the forums or the comment section of wherever you watch this episode or our Facebook, and let us know if you would like to see us get our slimy Magwambi on.
I know I would.
Hope I get turned into a slime. So great. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap us up. We thank everyone who's tuned in. If you want to find more fantastic content like this and other even better content, go check out NoDirectionPodcast.com, where we have amazing shows, fantastic blogs about Starfinder, Pathfinder, and all things RPG and geek related. You can enjoy that content. We have several actual plays that are going on there. We have, of course, No Direction Beyond. We have Geek Together. We've got lots of shows you should check out, as well as a cadre of fantastic bloggers that are way too good to be slumming it with the likes of us. Thank you all, especially thank you, Luis, for your contributions to the network over the years. And if you wish to see more content like this develop, see us grow, see us do more podcasts, go to conventions, get more recordings, that is only possible because of our supporters on our Patreon. You can find the link to our Patreon on our website at NoDirectionPodcast.com or go to patreon.com/NoDirection and support us there. Everyone that supports us, we super appreciate everything you do, and we continue to try to up our game and make sure that the network is something that you all will continue to enjoy. And if you wish to chat with us at any time, you can do so on our Discord server. You can find the link to that on our website at NoDirectionPodcast.com. It's in the right-hand side. It's on the right-hand side bar. Click the big giant Discord button. Join that server. It is the absolute chillest Pathfinder Starfinder community on the internet. We do not allow drama. And if you want to hang out with our fans and also hang out with all the network members, we're pretty much all active there all the time. Hanging out, chatting, talking about Starfinder, Pathfinder, geeky stuff, painting minis, trying to set up my new 3D printer.
Do you want to talk about that really quick?
Whoa, what about that? The 3D
Your
printer?
mini?
Oh, yes, my mini. I dropped it. Oh, no. Here it is. So, I'll definitely talk about this more in a future episode. We might get some other people involved in that talk that also. But I recently picked up a resin printer because they have gotten dirt cheap. And this is my first resin mini that I printed. It's a little dwarf that I just printed because he was short and he would print very fast and I would know if my printer was broken. And also, when do you don't need a dwarf? It was incredibly easy. This is so easy. When I got into 3D printing before, it was this big complicated mess with filaments and tuning things and heating your bed and like splicing power supplies and trying not to electrocute yourself. And now it's just like I plugged this thing in, I hit the calibrate button, I poured in the goo and hit go, and then got dwarf.
Great.
So it's super, I definitely wanted to, we'll definitely talk about this in the future, but this dwarf was 6 cents of material. I can print him 10 at a time in 2 hours. I don't know that I need to ever buy another mini from anybody again.
That almost sounds dangerous, having access to minis so easily.
I have a print job that I'm about to go hit go that's going to print out 15 city watch guards at the same time in 3 hours.
How big can you make a mini there?
My printer is actually one of the smaller resin printers. It's because it's only like $200. That's why it's so small. But it's like 3 inches. No, it's like almost 4 inches on one side, 6 inches on the other, and 8 inches tall. So if you can fit it inside that box,
so you can make huge minis.
Yeah,
but not gargantuan.
Well, you can print gargantuan minis because you can also print parts of minis. So you can slice up
true.
really big ones and then print their parts out and then put them together.
Then you are set for all of Age of Ashes if you like, I think.
Oh yeah, I'm actually running a problem with Age of Ashes because it uses some unique monsters and stuff that I don't have. Like, I've got a humongous miniature collection. I've got literally more than 5,000 painted minis right over here where my hand is waving. I usually have what I need. Age of Ashes has pushed my supply a bit, and I'm having to do more substitutions than I wish. I mean, it starts off with these weird wongy wingless dragons, like in like the first part of the castle. I'm like, I ain't got that. I ended up using rage drakes to substitute for them, which I think was pretty close. But you know, man, I really would like to be able to just print the exact mini. And there are humongous communities that, like, literally there are 2 different people that have built the entire monster manual for D&D as printable. So if it's any basic mini, it's not only available, it's available for free. And the paid for minis are cheap but look amazing. Like for $5 you can get like these dragon sculpts that look better than anything I've ever seen Reaper do. So I think this is definitely going to change the industry. I can't wait to talk more about it.
I know that I should not get one of those, for I will get too many minis.
Oh, this is now Luis's Christmas present. We're gonna swamp him and send him one. Now, the one downside is that the resin is toxic, so you can't touch it. So you have to wear gloves, and that sounds more dangerous than it really is. They also put off a lot of fumes, and up until recently that was a big problem. But they recently released resins that don't have harsh fumes or big strong smells or dangerous smells. But you know, that is something like kids can't do it, and if you've got pets, that's got to be a thing, and you have to have a place to set it up, and it's not really good for small apartments. And I do not know what your living situation is like, but I know Seattle
it's a small
does not
apartment,
have.
so.
Yeah, when I was apartment shopping in Seattle, I did not find a lot of 3 bedrooms and a backyards for $600.
No, not at all.
All right, so that's going to do it for us, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. And remember, if you want to find the path, you need no direction.